My name is Val Bercovici. I work at NetApp as the Cloud Czar. I love that title. I got to make it up myself. I also chair a standards initiative, a very important standards initiative called the Storage Network Industry Association, SNIA, Cloud Storage Initiative. And we are all about promoting cloud storage standards. We collaborate with cloud computing standards organizations, cloud security standards organizations, etc. We're on the storage side. And I'll get to talk a little bit about that. With me today, we also have from NetApp Eric Forget and a valued partner and customer, Terramark. Randy Rowland from Terramark is going to get up and wrap up the session as well, talking about the hands-on perspective. Eric is going to help us break the death by PowerPoint cycle this morning by giving us an actual demo of vCloud integration. So it should be a fun session together. What I'll do is start off with a little bit of business context. I promise not to redefine cloud. I've been doing this for about 2 years right now, and I'm bored to tears of defining cloud, so we're beyond that. We'll talk about the actual business context behind it. I will talk, certainly, because this is a storage session, about NetApp's value prop for shared infrastructure, which can be in support of a cloud or simply shared infrastructure in and of itself. As I mentioned, a demo about halfway through the talk, and we'll wrap it up with Randy's portion and how Terramark is using NetApp and vCloud together today to provide enterprise-class services to their customers. So the business context. Explosive data growth is something that we're all dealing with. We're all certainly familiar with it. What we're tasked with and what's new and different this time is we've kind of had exponential data growth for a long time. We're seeing it accelerated with the rise of social media, the richer content and media types we have at our disposal, the insane amount of resolution and capacity in the digital cameras we can buy today, and the video cameras and the flip cameras, our iPhones, etc. The tension is when we combine it with the macroeconomic environment and the fact that we're certainly not getting anywhere near the budget to linearly match the growth of data, particularly from a capacity perspective. And if anything, headcounts are being reduced due to those same budgetary constraints, and reorganizations within most companies and enterprises and public sector organizations now, reorganizations due to the overall shared infrastructure and cloud trend within IT. So a lot of tension, a lot of pressure there. Many of us want to move to this exciting new world of horizontal shared infrastructure, virtualized applications, virtualized desktops. But budget cycles only come around every 3, 4, 5 years. We can't move on demand whenever shiny new toys appear in a landscape. So we still have constraints around dedicated physical infrastructure and how to manage that and how to transition from dedicated physical silos over to horizontal shared infrastructure. And finally, this is, I think, the most strategic challenge, particularly at the executive level and in the IT management level, is how to get out of firefighting mode, where we spend the majority of our time and budgets, and how to actually add value to the company, to the organization, to our departments, by helping drive new services for customers, gain time-to-market advantage over our competition, and deliver new applications and new functionality in support of those requirements. So what we're seeing right now is, as a result of where we're constrained today, from either a legacy or simply a life cycle perspective, we're seeing this number, 10x, come up a lot. We're pretty much 10 times more wasteful, more inefficient than we could be if we leveraged all the latest and greatest new technologies. And that's creating a lot of pressure to review what we call within NetApp, and actually it's becoming a bit of an industry term in the cloud world, this existential challenge that a lot of IT executives are faced with right now. Do I relieve this pressure by essentially moving applications, moving infrastructure off-premise to some kind of cloud with a provider? Do I try and remodernize, refresh my IT, apply every best practice I'm learning at conferences like this, and be able to have a really lean, mean, efficient IT that's as agile and cost-effective as some of the public cloud providers? Those are the two main questions being asked and considered heavily right now. One of the things we know for sure is you can't continue to do business the same old way. Not only is it not scaling, it's actually breaking right now. So one of my favorite things is to talk about the perspectives on cloud. So we're not going to define it, but the perspectives are fascinating, because if you've ever been to a political rally as either a supporter of the person giving the stump speech or, as an opposer, you realize pretty quickly that cloud, like a political speech, means, everything to every person listening to it. And it can mean completely different things to different people listening to it, depending on your biases and your frame of reference. But it is important to lay out at least 5 key frames of reference for context here. And if you take away anything from this presentation, it's that cloud does not mean the same thing to different people, which is part of the continued confusion, perhaps even skepticism around it. So for a non-technical executive, cloud is new and novel, and it is very much a business trend. It is not a technology trend. It's a business trend, outside factors, combined with new technology that enables cloud, is why executives are talking about it. And this is different than other technology or business trends in the past, where you didn't see coverage in the Wall Street Journal and Business Week and The Economist, Financial Times. Other things that we talk about just never made those kinds of headlines in those publications, whereas cloud is. And quite frankly, quite simply, to a non-technical executive, cloud is a public way to measure a unit of computing, a unit of bandwidth, and a unit of storage for the first time. They never had this public rate card where they could measure what these granular units of IT should cost. Now, there's a giant asterisk attached, as most of us know, because there's certainly different levels of SLA associated with public cloud providers and internal on-premise clouds and hybrids in between. But a CEO now sees the opportunity to either be more efficient or, for them, more importantly, much more agile in using technology to their advantage and focusing on the company's core competency when it's not a technology-based company. At the very same table, in the very same discussion, you will see a technical executive have a completely different perspective on cloud. I've seen this myself on several occasions. The technical executive thinks this is an excellent opportunity to refresh or build out a new data center, to move finally to blade servers, to deploy a new SAN or network storage environment, get the latest equipment and networking technology from Cisco, perhaps deploy telepresence if they can justify that as cloud, etc. But it's basically a refresh opportunity for a technical executive. There's already a giant disconnect between executives at the same table and what cloud means to them. Here's where it gets fascinating to me. My background is both applications development and infrastructure architecture. The application guys went through a lot of disruption about a decade ago when we first saw the rise of overseas outsourcing, of particularly enterprise applications development. And over 10 years, they've kind of evolved and figured out a balance, a natural balance towards, what kind of business analysts that do applications requirements need to reside on-premise and be with the business units, whereas, the actual programmers themselves don't need to be on-premise if they're working off a fixed set of specifications and requirements. So what's happening right now is that for the first time ever, operators of infrastructure are going through that same disruption. And it is disruptive. If you are at the bottom there are a lot of worries and concerns in your world, because there's a very real chance that best case scenario, you're going to get reorganized. Worst case scenario, you're going to get outsourced. And that is a stressful time, and that's why, again, this leads to the rise of skeptics within a lot of organizations saying that, throw up any barriers, security, portability, control, governance. There's all sorts of reasons not to do cloud. And guess what? They might be valid reasons from your perspective, but that's not what the CEO is thinking. It's not what the CIO, CTO is thinking. It's not what the other folks in the organization, especially the business units, are thinking. And if I were to make a prediction, it's that people that are responding to the business requirements, and specifically the application architects, are going to be the power brokers, the influencers, as cloud matures in 5 to 10 years. If you've ever seen the Steve Ballmer video, Dancing on Stage, developers, the man is a bit of a genius and ahead of his time, because that really is what's going to drive cloud in the future. Today we're all about infrastructure. The future is going to be about next-generation applications the platforms and APIs and web services they're going to be using to deliver those next-generation applications, and the infrastructure will follow, although today, infrastructure is where the money is. Another element of cloud that we really have to make sure we internalize is that we don't have to have polarized discussions about when everything moves to the cloud, when we get rid of all those dedicated servers. That's unlikely to happen in its entirety. In IT, we still have mainframes. And even though they're fading away, they're never going to be gone. We still have tape. And even though that's fading away, it's never going to be gone. Same thing with dedicated physical infrastructures. It might be due to extreme performance requirements. It might be due to extreme sensitivity or literally an absolutely core application for the entire business that you need full on-premise control and dedicated staff over. There's a whole bunch of legitimate technical and business reasons why some physical infrastructure will remain over time. But what we see here is definitely as the clouds in this picture grow from left to right, we see that there's a giant category of applications that can thrive on shared infrastructure, on-premise or off. And as this trend matures, we're already seeing, even NetApp internally is quite progressive, about 40% of our applications of various types, some business critical, most not, but most, 40% of those applications are already off-premise with a service provider. So it's some kind of hybrid cloud, not really a public cloud. Within our governance policies, within our firewall, authentication framework, VPN, et cetera. So that's the evolution we're seeing, and that's, again, a very important thing to establish when we consider infrastructures of the future, is it's not all or nothing, it's not black or white, despite some of the more sensational arguments that tend to dominate the industry when change is upon us. So let's focus in a bit on the value that NetApp provides. We have the fortunate benefit of having served the service provider marketplace for well over a decade. One of the earliest big references we have is Yahoo. All of Yahoo Mail, Flickr, Yahoo Finance, a whole bunch of their services have been on NetApp almost from day one, maybe day two if we go back 15 years or something. They started from two systems, two filers as we call them, called Mama and Papa, setting up an email service called Rocket Mail, which is still a domain name you can use if you don't want a Yahoo account. 50 gigabyte system, giant, massive system in 1994, 1995. Today, they have, I think, we just heard an internal presentation by their VP of infrastructure, something like 3,600 storage arrays from NetApp across the globe, upwards of 300 petabytes. So not quite an exabyte, unfortunately, but they're on their way, 300 petabytes. And the most impressive stat for me is they use about, I think they're up to 20 admins now for 300 petabytes of storage. So that's a very impressive ratio, and that's one of the key litmus tests you should be using with regards to the efficiency of the storage infrastructure you're choosing, is what's the FTE, the admin requirement per unit of storage and per application. So having multiple petabytes be managed by just one individual is a very efficient way to scale. And that really is a microcosm for this market trend that we're seeing. The most successful service providers have a very big gap between what their public frontline service and cost is and their internal cost to actually provide the service. That's where all the profit margin is made. That's where all the potential differentiation in the marketplace is. And you want to be very careful to not use building block approaches that do nothing but scale your costs with your price. So obviously, you want to be down at that green line internally. You don't want to be anywhere up near that blue line. And a couple of key ways to get there: driving your costs down. Sharing a standard, obviously, I have to promote that. Complying with standards, whether it's standard protocols or interface web services standards, etc., broadens your market opportunity over the long term. Gives power to your customers, and as much as we all want to lock customers in, at the end of the day, no one's dumb here in the room. If you're a customer, you don't want to be locked in. You want choice. The more you feel good about making a positive choice for a provider or a service, the more loyal you're going to tend to be as opposed to being forced. No one feels good about being forced to do something. So standards and clearly the ability to drive a lot of self-service portal-type interfaces with heavy automation. And I can't emphasize that enough. If there's humans involved nowadays in delivering a cloud service, you're doing something wrong, and hopefully you're on your way to remediating that. The process of procuring, provisioning, providing a service should be 100% automated. There's a couple of back-end things that can still be manual, certainly customer support, accounts remediation, things like that, but everything else should be 100% automated. I'm going to touch as well on a couple of key requirements to make infrastructure very, very efficient, and they're features such as integrated data protection. As you differentiate, if you're going to become an internal and external provider, and you want to provide higher SLAs, primarily through better data protection, it's very inexpensive, in fact, almost impossible to achieve this ideal environment here if you have to buy separate infrastructure for backing up and recovering data from the infrastructure that actually stores the data itself. So integrating recovery points, integrating rapid recovery times, helping manage that at scale is a key requirement to keeping your costs low and achieving economies of scale. And finally, this is a term that was new about a year ago. It's kind of refreshing to see how well it's been adopted, but the whole multi-tenant phenomenon. And this is actually very pertinent to what vCloud is all about, vCloud Director in particular. The notion of organizing your resources into virtual data centers, the notion of creating virtual organizations that can map to those data centers, that's really the instantiation of multi-tenancy. And that is an absolutely essential requirement towards sharing. In kindergarten, we were all taught to share. It turns out that was a very good lesson in the cloud world, because if you can't share physical assets and physical infrastructure multiple ways, you are once again doing the one-for-one building block approach, and you are not going to be able to keep your costs down as you scale your services, and you'll have no profit. So all those three things, by the way, actually map to a concept that's gaining a lot of momentum and popularity in the storage industry, and that's known as unified storage. Now, unified storage is often confused with the ability for one array to support multiple protocols. That might have been a definition of unified storage about 10 years ago, when NetApp was the first to introduce that capability. It is an antiquated and quite frankly, almost valueless notion today. Unified storage is about much more than just multi-protocol support. Probably the most important thing to internalize is unified storage is not a product. Unified storage is the product. It's the entire portfolio. If the entire portfolio doesn't support all the features I'm about to describe, including multi-protocol support, if the entire portfolio with a single family of products, compatible backwards, upwards, and downwards, doesn't scale from entry-level to mid-range to high-end, you've got a product that might support some things, but you don't have a unified storage architecture. It's tactics versus strategy. One of the things that we've been able to implement and offer to the industry is the fact that unified storage shouldn't tie you down to one vendor's disks. This is a particularly flexible advantage when you're dealing with the financial realities of owning assets, being on either extended or variable depreciation cycles. The world we live in today has lots of M&A activity, so you might be inheriting assets you didn't even buy. And just due to endless internal reorganizations, you might end up inheriting assets you didn't buy or choose yourself. So the ability to extend the full benefits of unified storage across third-party disks in a supported manner is another key requirement. And lastly, the integration of all the cool new stuff into the entire product line as opposed to just one segment of the product line is also essential. One of my favorite new technologies, this is a standards committee I was involved in 2 years ago, is the exciting things happening with solid state. And solid state, about 2 years ago, also got a bad rap in the enterprise because the same manufacturers that created firmware for digital cameras were the ones offering the first generation solid state drives. And guess what? You take a picture, you write that picture to a flash card and a digital camera a few times a day, collectively over a week or a month, dozens or hundreds of times. Not like 50,000 IOs per hour or per minute or something on an enterprise application. So a lot of maturity happened in the industry quite rapidly, and today Solid-state storage, either in the form of a PCI card as a cache accelerator or in the form of a disk package itself, has come a long ways and is adding tremendous value to infrastructures, and particularly storage infrastructures, by reducing the number of disks you have to purchase, power, cool, and replace when they break, and lowering your overall data center footprint, your power cooling profile dramatically for many enterprise applications where that infrastructure as a service commonly supports. So all of that is really what defines unified storage. And I noticed something really interesting on the way to this session. One of the most popular recommended sessions today is Power CLI in VMware. I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is. It's actually an origin of a technology project a friend of mine, Adam Barr at Microsoft, created. It was called Monad, PowerShell from Microsoft. The ability to do sophisticated command line scripting, which is kind of an oxymoron when you think about Windows and Microsoft, but it's become a really, really robust language for automating a lot of administrative tasks. And the more I sit back and look at our best, most successful customers, the more I realize that the ones that automated their infrastructure completely were able to be first to market, have the most efficient services, and be the most agile in delivering new services. And the way they automated their infrastructure, quite frankly, was by choosing programmable infrastructure. So Cisco UCS is a great example of that. That blade environment, can be completely repersonalized, if you will, with different service profiles, without manually flipping any switches, without pulling cables. You can program that infrastructure. You can program a lot of network switches and routers today. The advantage of unified storage is it's one API for an extremely broad product set with a lot of exciting functionality, fully programmable. And in a VMware context, in a Power CLI context, the ability to fully program your infrastructure puts you miles ahead of your competition in terms of being able to bring cool new infrastructure services to market and modify them quickly. So I'm going to rush through this here because we have a lot more content. This is a strategic planning framework that we use within NetApp, the four corners we call it. Reading from the bottom, sometimes entry-level systems, you have strong bias for very, very simple, out-of-the-box experience and low cost. If you stay down at the bottom, heading to the right side of the graph, you see a lot of very dense systems, which also require very, very low power and cooling, but they're not necessarily performance-oriented systems, they're archive systems. Moving up on the right, you see where a lot of enterprise storage tends to be procured from, a preference for high performance and a very high availability. And finally, there's also the challenging HPC, high-performance computing marketplace, which is technically fascinating and has never been lucrative. And as a result, as a public company at NetApp, we've been hesitant to chase that market too aggressively. So this is the planning framework that we use. And again, one of the reasons I put this slide up is to give you an idea of the various boundaries and the tension between these four corners that we use to continue to evaluate what capability we should add to our unified storage product line. And if you kind of see a trend emerging here, the fattest part of this chart is really that middle part from the bottom left to the top right. That represents the most lucrative part of the storage market as measured by IDC and Gartner and some other analysts. So you see NetApp, particularly in conjunction with VMware, Cisco, doing a ton of joint engineering and joint innovation, quite frankly, to address, in a capitalistic manner, that most lucrative part of the market. And we get pulled into some of the other market segments, obviously, where we see an emerging market opportunity, or quite frankly, when a very big customer tells us we have to. So, quickly, to wrap it up, one of the biggest mistakes you can make by far is equating storage with capacity. Again, that's a very antiquated notion, and it's the quickest way to sort of, slow down your career path and certainly add the least amount of value to your company. Storage is about way more than capacity. It starts there, but the way to evaluate storage is what kind of agility, what kind of flexibility, and as I'll touch on, what kind of efficiency it can deliver, because it is a foundation for your infrastructure. The buck stops with storage when it comes to the data. Everything else just happens to be a proxy for how you serve it out. So it's really important you get the foundation right. Performance scaling is a bit of a black art sometimes, and it's been completely reinvented with the advent of solid-state flash storage. So all the sizing exercises you went through methodically to determine what these spinning mechanical disks could do before, you've almost got to toss most of that out the window and reevaluate what solid-state storage, particularly when it's seamlessly integrated, can do for you. And finally, where the money is at the bottom there, operational scaling. If you can get to multiple petabytes managed by one person, if you can get to fully automated infrastructure because your storage is highly programmable across the entire product line, you win. Some of the things that we're going to talk about in the demo here are extensions of our secure multi-tenancy architecture, which has become quite a popular thing. An announcement we made about January of this year with VMware and Cisco. It is a Cisco-validated reference architecture supported by all three companies officially, and it is a flexible way to implement infrastructure that's integrated end-to-end with multi-tenancy in mind. It's the ability to share server cycles in a secure and isolated way from a quality of service and security perspective in a completely integrated manner with your networking, particularly storage networking, in a completely integrated manner at the storage layer, such that you can carve out multiple logical pools of data that are flexible, can grow and shrink dynamically in real time, that service business needs, and it's all happening through some magic in our software at being mapped to these very physically limited, fixed-sized disk drives or solid-state drives. Mobility is also fascinating right now. I don't really have time to get into it, but if you haven't heard of a concept called follow the moon, and a way to basically chase the lowest cost of power on a global basis throughout either a daily or a weekly or whatever cycle you use, there are new technologies now that complement the super popular vMotion functionality at the server layer, complement that down at the storage layer, because it's actually relatively, I don't want to trivialize it, it's relatively simple to move a virtual application or virtual machine from server to server. It's a whole other task to move, terabytes or petabytes of that data. And there's a lot of sleight of hand that happens if you want to do that by essentially presenting that terabyte or petabyte on the other side of the world instantly, but you're really only caching the hot blocks and moving those over on demand in real time. Most of the cold part of that petabyte remains where it was originally and may never get pulled over if it's not accessed. And again, from a tangible perspective, this is the real deal here. Storage efficiency is a hot trend. It's not a feature. It's a portfolio of features that are integrated tightly and work together as opposed to conflict with each other when you have to implement best practices. This gives you that 10x effect. Today, particularly in hypervisor-centric environments, NetApp customers are deploying 1/10 the storage to satisfy the same requirement as any other storage vendor, which means, of course, that's 1/10, not just the CapEx requirement, 1/10 the power, cooling, and floor tile footprint. And the integrated functionality I spoke of earlier means that with NetApp you can have integrated recovery points, integrated rapid recovery times, HA, and so forth on the same array. There's no third party or other product family from the same vendor to buy to merely protect your data or to extend its availability across data centers. It's built in. Again, huge economies of scale there. So I think I've already run over time. I apologize for that. But with that, let's break up the PowerPoint and actually give you a demo by Eric of vCloud Director and NetApp in action.
Okay, so before I jump into the demo, I want to kind of level set. I know that VMware vCloud Director was just announced this week, so I'll give you a quick 101 on that. I think everyone in this conference is fairly comfortable with the idea of virtualization. Basically, we're going to take hardware resources, abstract them with vSphere, and create vSphere resources. The new abstraction is the idea of virtual data centers. The virtual data center is going to be made up of a resource pool, some storage, and some network resources. And the way that you'll control these virtual data centers is by limiting the physical resources using the settings in the resource pool, right? So there's a very nice workflow in vCloud Director that allows you to choose these things and create a provider VDC with a specific service offering, right? How much memory, how much CPU. But at the storage layer, if we're talking about legacy storage systems, you can't really provide that same level of granularity. If you've played with vCloud Director so far, you'll notice that the one tunable that you have is the amount of capacity that a provider VDC will get, right? And as Val mentioned, that's really just one of the things that you want to control when you're setting up an SLA. These provider VDCs are then presented to the tenant or the customer in groups called organizations, and organizations can have org VDCs, or organizational virtual data centers. And within the org VDC, you're able to create VApps, and the VApp is a container for virtual machines. So if we change the picture just slightly, what it enables us to do is actually provide a very similar set of settings in the service offering so that your SLA includes both memory CPU resources and the aspects of your storage. What we've done here in the demo is present the storage service catalog, which is a list of basically SLAs that you could then build data stores off of. And the things that make up an SLA would be the speed of the disk type, how often, and if there's backup, snapshot backup associated with it, as well as disaster recovery. Are we replicating it somewhere? And is there the ability to do the data motion, which is the ability to move a whole data store around from physical controller to physical controller. The way that we have automated this is we've created a plugin for VMware vCenter Orchestrator. So there's been a couple of sessions on this today, actually throughout the week. And actually the plugin that I'm going to show you was featured in a VMware demonstration, which included the UCS provider or plugin from Cisco. So very, very extendable stuff. And let me jump in and show you that now. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the vCloud Director, and what I've got so far are 5 provider VDCs. So these are already existing. My infrastructure is all set up, and I've decided I need to create another provider to VDC, maybe at a new level, a new SLA. What we're looking at here is the NetApp Management Console, and this is where we define our SLA. And our SLA, or what we call a storage service, is going to be what I mentioned before: backup and replication, performance aspects, whether or not we're going to do deduplication or auto grow as the customer needs it, as well as setting up secure multi-tenancy, the ability to move things around, data motion, and even providing NAS right in the org VDC. Since most of this is based on Virtual Center, what we'll see is most of the activity is going to take place in Virtual Center. What we're looking at here is the orchestrator framework, and this is the client itself. And as soon as this starts, I'm going to pause it. Okay, so I just paused it here so we can take a look at the workflow. This workflow running in the client can also be exported as a web service. So those of you thinking about doing kind of a self-service web access, you basically get that for free as a feature of Orchestrator, and the web interface looks and acts exactly as this form does right here. So we're going to choose the cloud that we want to provide the provider VDC in. I've only got one in this case. And then we need to choose the compute cluster within vSphere that we want to base our new provider VDC on. And this is the one that I showed just previously in the vSphere client. And then finally, we're going to create a new data store. The way that the plugin works is you can actually create your new data store on a physical asset. So you can pick one of the NetApp controllers and one of the volumes or aggregates in there to create the storage on. But to do an SLA, what we've done is presented the service catalog here. And as I click on each of these, you'll see in the description how they differ. So in the gold storage, we've got replication. In the silver, it's very similar to the gold, but without replication. And in the case of the bronze storage, we're creating the data stores on SATA, and we're not even doing backups. So maybe this is just a test dev. At this point, we're going to fill out the basic information that's going to make up our provider VDC. So I've provided a name here. You've got some different settings that you can set as far as the amount of CPU and memory. Once I hit start, you can see the tasks as we go along there. The yellow one is the one that's active. And so far what we've done is created the resource pool called VMworld. And the task that's working right now is the NetApp data store allocation. So this is going to provision the storage on the NetApp controller based on that SLA, set up all of those pieces, and then attach it to the ESX hosts. And if we flip back over to the NetApp Management Console, we can see that we've done just that. We've created what we call a data set, which is equal to a data store in this case, and you can see there's nothing in it yet. And we've attached it to each of the ESX hosts that make up this particular cluster, and you can see we've got a new data store. And we've used the name of the provider VDC for each of the objects that we've created here. You can see this actually, this demo is in real time, so this completed in less than a minute. And finally, if we flip back to the vCloud and we do our refresh, we'll see our new one called VMworld. So we've got a new provider VDC and the matching SLA-based data store. Now I can take this and provide, there's 0 org VDCs. I would be able to create some of our org VDCs from here with this. So before we answer any questions, we'll have Randy come up and hand off the baton.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
It's good stuff. All right, my name's Randy Rowland. I'm the SVP of Product Development for Terramark Worldwide. I'll talk just a couple of minutes about who Terramark is. Terramark builds and operates top-tier, highly secure facilities here in the United States, in Europe, and in Latin America. We provide managed IT services. We have some cloud computing offerings I want to talk about in a couple of minutes. A couple of unique things about Terramark. About just over 20% of our overall revenue is with the federal government. And the reason that's unique is most of the contracts we have require some level of security. And so we've been able to certify our data center and our cloud products with our federal customers. Another unique thing about Terramark is the connectivity. We are a carrier-neutral facility, and we have 160 different global carriers that come into our facilities, so it gives our clients choice in selecting network access for their infrastructure. So that's a little bit about Terramark. Our managed IT infrastructure offerings are in three basic categories. We go from co-location through cloud computing and managed hosting. In co-location, our clients buy within our facilities and bring their own compute, storage, and network infrastructure and operate it themselves. In our cloud offerings, we go up one layer where customers are actually buying compute infrastructure. So they buy capacity of compute, storage, and network, and then they control their own operating system and application deployments. And then our managed hosting offerings is if a client would like us to actually provide full lifecycle management of their operating system or application. And our approach in this is that we don't really guide a client one way or the other. They usually know exactly what they want to buy. The other thing that we can do is create hybrid solutions, right? So what we'll find is that our clients, sometimes they need co-location for a certain project, and they may need cloud for a new project, and so we can intermix those, and including the networking between those environments, so it's not all cloud or all colo. They can actually start to create hybrid solutions for their projects. So what I want to spend a little bit of time today on is our infrastructure. Terramark's approach is to create enterprise-class infrastructure. All of our products, all of our strategy around delivering enterprise-class products to our customers, and it starts with our data centers. We encourage our customers to come visit our data centers. Not all data centers are created equal. A tour in one of our data centers makes that very clear. In our data centers, we focus on security, availability, and environmentals. And within those facilities, we build cloud computing platforms. And I think this is part of our relationship with NetApp that's important. Since our customers are federal government and enterprise, they want to understand exactly where their cloud assets reside within the data center. They want to know what computing infrastructure it's running on. They want to know what storage it's sitting on. It's not, a lot of times with cloud today, everybody thinks, hey, I'm buying something, I don't know where it goes and what it's running on. And with enterprise IT departments, you can't abandon IT best practice. You have to understand where your data resides, what infrastructure it's on. And so we focus on that not only at the data center level, but also our network vendors. Cisco, we leverage their platform not only on the network side, but also on the server side. And then that's another part of the reason that we're strong partners with VMware. You've heard published over 90% of the enterprise leverages VMware for their virtual infrastructure. And we want to create an environment that clients are comfortable with. They trust VMware, and we've built our platforms on the VMware technology. So I just want to highlight one of our products, Enterprise Cloud. I heard Val talk about secure multi-tenancy, and that's really been the premise of this product since the beginning. It's a little bit different than most of the public cloud offerings that you've heard, where you can go online and sign up with your credit card and spin up a couple of VMs. We actually built this from the ground up for the enterprise to run high-performing apps, to build in security. And we've taken this virtual private cloud approach where customers get a set of resources that they can deploy their applications on. They are secure and they're dedicated to the client. We've moved away from the concept of servers or VMs and more into processing, memory, and storage, right? So customers buy gigahertz of processor, gigabytes of RAM, gigabytes of storage, megabits of bandwidth in pools, and they can allocate those resources in any way they see fit. One of the unique parts of this is that when a customer buys a resource pool, it's guaranteed to them. It's not oversubscribed with other clients, so it's guaranteed resources. But we also make bursting available. So we understand clients need liquid computing. They need access to temporary compute or storage cycles. And so we have purposely built bursting into the platform so that clients can leverage and pay on a metered basis for any resources that go over their dedicated resource pools. Another thing that we've really focused on is to integrate private networks and physical devices so that, right now today we can run a lot more in the cloud than we could 3 years ago, and 3 years from now we'll run even more. But not everything is ready to run in the cloud. And we built our platform so you can integrate physical devices and networks to get access to legacy systems or systems that still require specialized computing devices. And that's our enterprise cloud platform. Talk a little bit about our clients. We have a number of clients, Web 2.0. These clients are really interested in our connectivity because we have access to so many carriers. We also have a number of carriers that exchange traffic within our business. We talked a little bit about enterprises and internet infrastructure companies leverage our facilities to deliver their platforms. Federal government, I'll stop for a second and highlight, this is an important part of our business. USA.gov is our country's website, and it runs on the enterprise cloud platform. So it's important to have secure multi-tenant access to this platform. Vivek Kundra, the CIO of the federal government, has spoke a lot about this. They've experienced substantial cost savings. And we have a number of government properties that we're running on our cloud computing environments. So last slide, and then we can turn it over for Q&A. So why does Terramark choose NetApp? And I think, I highlighted it earlier. Since we are focused on the enterprise and the federal government, they want to understand the relationships we have with our vendors, and they also want to buy some of the features that were created for the enterprise. And so we continue to surface more and more of those functions within our cloud computing platforms. We have a much more credible story when meeting with clients, knowing that NetApp's on the back end of our platform. We leverage their leader in virtualization. You can see the Gartner Magic Quadrant there. So as we pursue the enterprise, we're going to continue to surface more and more of NetApp's specific technology within our cloud platforms. And I think because of our focus, it really helps us in partnering with NetApp and making offerings where the enterprise is more comfortable in moving their assets into the external cloud provider. So that's what I have, and we could turn it over for questions.
So we'll bring all of us up on stage. We rushed through some of the content here because we wanted to make sure there was time left over before everyone had to rush off to the next session for questions regarding really anything that we've presented today, whether it's cloud, NetApp, storage, service providers, or the newly announced VMware vCloud Director functionality and questions about that. We'll repeat if we have to, but if you could step up to the mic, it might even make it easier for everyone else to hear the question. Go ahead, sir.
With the demo we just saw with the orchestrator, is that GA today? Was that general availability today?
No, so that's not GA today. Have a look in the next 6 months, and we'll have it on the roadmap. It's obviously pretty functional today, and something that we're looking to extend the capabilities of.
Any other questions? We should have planted some in the crowd, I think, actually. Okay, well, if not, we're going to leave ourselves some time if you want to approach us here at the stage to answer one-on-one questions as well. And thank you very much for your time.